The Extinction Gambit. The FSS Vanguard cut through the endless void of space like a predator stalking through the night. Its obsidian hull absorbed rather than reflected starlight, presenting only the faintest silhouette against the backdrop of distant stars. The kilometer-long vessel represented humanity's ultimate achievement, a warship constructed not from desperate necessity after conflict began, but from the calm, rational understanding that the universe held predators and Earth needed teeth. Admiral Eleanor Reeves stood on the bridge, her weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of tactical displays. 40 years in Earth's defense forces had etched deep lines around her eyes and whitened her once black hair, but had done nothing to diminish the intensity of her gaze. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who had survived 3 conflicts and 17 major engagements. Commander Jiang Wei, her executive officer, looked up from his station. "Stealth systems functioning at optimal capacity, Admiral. We're effectively invisible to conventional detection methods. Long-range sensors are picking up significant activity in the auxiliary fleet. 17 capital ships, approximately 40 support vessels." Eleanor nodded, studying the holographic representation of the enemy formation. The auxiliary ships resembled massive crystalline structures, their surfaces covered in geometric patterns that pulsed with an eerie violet light. They moved with unnatural precision, maintaining perfect formation despite traveling at speeds that would have challenged human navigation systems. "And they still have no idea we're here," she stated rather than asked. The Vanguard stealth technology represented the pinnacle of human ingenuity, the product of decades of research and the collective brilliance of Earth's greatest minds. "No indication they've detected us," replied Lieutenant Maya Petal from the sensor station. "Their scan patterns remain routine. 9 months ago, humanity had celebrated its first contact with an alien civilization. The auxiliary had appeared at the edge of the solar system, their communication signals containing mathematical sequences that universal translators had eventually decoded as greetings of peace and cooperation. Earth's governments had scrambled to prepare a unified response, assembling delegations and organizing welcome ceremonies. But Admiral Reeves, along with a small contingent of military leadership, had seen patterns in the auxiliary approach that triggered alarm bells. The methodical way they had positioned themselves, the specific frequencies they monitored, the particular interest they showed in Earth's biomass and population centers, all pointed to assessment rather than friendship. While politicians prepared speeches, Eleanor had quietly secured authorization for Operation Sentinel, the deployment of advanced stealth probes to shadow the auxiliary fleet and gather intelligence. 3 weeks later, those probes had intercepted internal auxiliary communications that confirmed her worst fears. The bridge doors hissed open as Dr. Ilara Nwosu entered, the chief xenobiologist's normally calm demeanor visibly strained. "Admiral, we've completed our analysis of the latest auxiliary transmissions." Eleanor turned, noting the tablet clutched tightly in the scientist's hands. "Go ahead, Doctor." "The auxiliary aren't just another expansionist species," Ilara said, her voice tight. "They're systematic resource harvesters. They've developed an efficient method for converting biomass, specifically the complex neural systems of sentient species, into a form of energy that powers their technology." Commander Wei's expression darkened. "They see us as batteries." "Worse," Ilara continued. "Their communications classify Earth as a premium harvest site, one of the richest concentrations of neural complexity they've encountered in this sector. The diplomatic mission they're planning isn't about cultural exchange. It's an assessment of the most efficient harvesting methods." Eleanor studied the tactical display, where the auxiliary fleet hung in space like a sword poised above humanity's neck. 6 billion lives. The entirety of human civilization, art, science, history, and potential, reduced to nothing more than resources to be processed. "How long until they make their move?" she asked. "Based on their communication patterns, less than 72 hours, replied Communications Officer Lieutenant Ahmed Rashid. They're preparing what they call conversion fields for deployment. Eleanor's jaw tightened. The FSS Vanguard was humanity's most advanced warship, but it was still one vessel against an armada. The rest of Earth's fleet consisted primarily of retrofitted exploration ships and orbital defense platforms, none designed to face a technologically superior enemy that had likely conquered dozens of worlds. Options, she asked, looking around at her senior staff. Tactical Officer Commander Sofia Volkov spoke up, her Russian accent more pronounced under stress. Conventional weapons would be insufficient against their numbers and technology, Admiral. Even our most advanced missiles would be intercepted before reaching effective range. What about the NOVA system? Eleanor asked, referring to the experimental weapon integrated into the Vanguard's design, a closely guarded secret known only to the ship's senior officers and a handful of officials on Earth. Commander Wei exchanged glances with Chief Engineer Commander Tarek Nazari, who had just entered the bridge. Nazari's dark features were grave as he responded. The NOVA system remains untested in combat conditions, Admiral. Simulations suggest it could neutralize multiple Solari vessels, but we would need to be at point-blank range, inside their defensive envelope. And there's a significant risk of cascading feedback that could damage the Vanguard itself. Eleanor considered this information, weighing impossible options against certain extinction. The Vanguard had been built for this moment, for the defense of humanity against existential threats. But even this marvel of human engineering faced near impossible odds. What about their command structure? She asked. Have we identified a flagship? Dr. Mozu nodded, manipulating her tablet to highlight one of the largest Solari vessels on the tactical display. This vessel appears to coordinate all fleet movements. Their communication patterns suggest a highly centralized command system. A plan began to form in Eleanor's mind. Desperate, certainly suicidal, but not impossible. And when the alternative was watching Earth harvested, impossible odds became acceptable. Commander Wei, plot a course that will bring us within the shadow of their outer patrol vessels. Lieutenant Patel, I want continuous updates on their sensor sweep patterns. We'll time our movements to their blind spots. The bridge crew looked at her with a mixture of apprehension and determination as they realized what she was proposing. You're planning to take us into the heart of their fleet, Commander Volkov stated. Eleanor nodded. The Vanguard was built with the most advanced stealth technology humanity has ever developed. If we can position ourselves near their command ship without detection, we might have a chance to strike at their leadership before they can coordinate a response. And if we're detected? Asked Lieutenant Rashid. Then we fight, Eleanor replied simply. Better to die in battle than watch our world harvested. The Admiral turned to Chief Engineer Nazari. Commander, I need the NOVA system ready for deployment. Whatever modifications are needed to increase its effectiveness, make them. Nazari hesitated only briefly. The system was never meant to be used at such close range. Admiral, the energy discharge would likely. I understand the risks, Commander. Eleanor cut him off. Make it work. As her orders were acknowledged, and the crew moved with practiced efficiency to their stations, Eleanor turned back to the view screen. Somewhere beyond those enemy vessels was Earth, blue, beautiful, and utterly unaware of how close it stood to extinction. 6 billion souls who still believed the Solari came in peace, who were preparing welcomes rather than defenses. Admiral, Commander Wei's voice interrupted her thoughts. I've calculated an approach vector that will minimize detection probability. But there's something else. The Solari appear to be testing some form of interdimensional technology. Our sensors are detecting spatial distortions around several of their vessels. Eleanor frowned. Elaborate. Dr. Mosu stepped forward. From what we can determine, they're creating localized wormholes, possibly as a means of rapid resource transportation after harvesting. The energy requirements would be enormous, which explains their interest in neural energy, Eleanor concluded. They're powering interdimensional travel with the converted consciousness of entire species. The bridge fell silent as the full horror of the Xalari's intentions became clear. This wasn't simple conquest or even resource acquisition. It was industrialized extinction, refined across countless worlds. How much time until we reach an optimal position near their command vessel? Eleanor asked. Approximately 6 hours, maintaining current stealth protocols, replied Navigator Lieutenant James Chen. Eleanor nodded. All stations, prepare for combat operations. I want alternative attack strategies developed for every possible scenario. And send word to Earth. Encrypted channel, tight beam transmission. They need to begin emergency preparations immediately. As her crew set to work, Eleanor studied the enemy fleet once more. The Vanguard was about to attempt something no human vessel had ever done. Penetrate an alien armada undetected and strike at its heart. The fate of humanity would rest on their success or failure. 6 hours later, the Vanguard slipped silently between the massive Xalari vessels, a ghost among giants. The alien ships, despite their advanced technology, remained oblivious to the human predator in their midst. Eleanor watched from the bridge as they passed close enough to one crystalline vessel that its violet light illuminated the command deck. We're approaching optimal position, Commander Wee reported, his voice barely above a whisper, although there was no possibility the Xalari could hear them. 500 kilometers from their command ship. Eleanor nodded. Maintain stealth protocols. Status of the NOVA system. Online and configured as requested, replied Commander Nazari from engineering. But Admiral, I must again emphasize the risks. At this range, the energy discharge will likely be detectable even before it reaches its target. We'll lose the element of surprise after the first shot. Understood, Eleanor replied. But if we can decapitate their command structure, it might buy us the advantage we need. She turned to communications. Lieutenant Rashid, are you still intercepting their transmissions? Yes, Admiral. They're finalizing harvesting zones for Earth. First targets include our most densely populated cities. Their conversion process appears designed to maximize neural energy extraction, while subjects remain conscious. Eleanor's expression hardened. Weapons status. Conventional systems ready, reported Commander Volkov. No VA primed for initial discharge. The moment of decision had arrived. One ship against an armada. Experimental weapons against proven alien technology. The desperate gambit of a species facing extinction. Eleanor took a deep breath. On my mark, disengage stealth systems and power NOVA to maximum capacity. Target their command vessel. All other weapon systems, prepare to engage secondary targets. The bridge crew tensed, each officer acutely aware that they were about to reveal themselves to an enemy that outnumbered them dozens to one. For Earth, Eleanor said quietly, then more firmly, execute. The Vanguard's stealth field disappeared as power was diverted to weapon systems. The ship became visible among the Xalari fleet, like a wolf suddenly appearing in a flock of sheep. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened, the aliens seemingly unable to process the sudden appearance of a vessel where none had been detected. Then the Vanguard's forward section began to glow with building energy, concentrating into a brilliant point of light that grew steadily in intensity until it was painful to look at directly. No VA discharge in 3, 2, 1. Commander Volkov counted down. The light erupted from the Vanguard in a concentrated beam that struck the Xalari command ship with devastating precision. The alien vessel's crystalline structure seemed to absorb the energy momentarily before fractures began to appear across its surface, spreading like cracks in ice. Then, with a silent flash that temporarily overwhelmed the Vanguard's visual sensors, the command ship shattered into thousands of fragments. For a brief moment, silence reigned on the bridge. Then sensor alarms began blaring as the remaining Xalari vessels reacted to the destruction of their command center. Multiple vessels powering weapons, reported Lieutenant Pottle. They're surrounding us, Admiral. Eleanor watched as the tactical display showed the Xelari fleet reorganizing with remarkable speed despite the loss of their command ship. The element of surprise had given them one victory, but now the real battle would begin. "Bring us about," she ordered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. The NOVA system will need time to recharge. Until then, we fight with everything else we have." As the Vanguard turned to face the converging Xelari vessels, Eleanor felt a strange calm settle over her. They had struck the first blow in humanity's defense, proving that Earth would not go quietly into extinction. Whether they survived the next few hours or not, they had already changed the course of the conflict. The Xelari had come expecting to harvest a defenseless world. Instead, they had found that humans were predators too. And now they would learn just how dangerous humanity could be when fighting for its survival. Legends among the stars. The bridge of the FSS Vanguard shuddered as another Xelari energy blast struck the shields. Warning lights flashed across multiple stations, and the acrid smell of overheated circuitry filled the air. "Shield integrity at 38%, reported Lieutenant Chen, his fingers dancing across the navigation controls as he executed another evasive maneuver. "We can't take much more of this, Admiral." Eleanor Reeves gripped the command rail, studying the tactical display with unwavering focus. The destruction of the Xelari command ship had thrown their fleet into momentary disarray, but they had reorganized with alarming efficiency. Now 16 capital ships had formed a spherical formation around the Vanguard, methodically coordinating their attacks to wear down the human vessel's defenses. "Status of the NOVA system," she demanded. Chief Engineer Nazari's voice came through the comm system, strained and punctuated by the sounds of frantic activity in engineering. "Power cells still charging, Admiral. The initial discharge depleted our reserves more than anticipated. We need at least 7 more minutes." Eleanor's jaw tightened. 7 minutes might as well be 7 years in the current situation. "We don't have 7 minutes, Commander. Find a way to accelerate the process." "Working on it," Nazari replied. "But there are hard physical limits to how quickly the containment field can safely reestablish." His voice cut off as another blast rocked the ship, more violent than the previous ones. Overhead lighting flickered, and several consoles sparked with electrical discharges. "That was their heavy cruiser," Commander Volkov reported from Tactical. "They're bringing their bigger guns into play now." "Direct hit to our port quarter." "Return fire," Eleanor ordered. "All conventional weapons, focus on that cruiser. Let's see if we can keep them at a distance until NOVA is back online." The Vanguard's secondary weapon systems engage, launching a barrage of high-yield missiles and directed energy weapons. On the tactical display, Eleanor watched as most of the missiles were intercepted by the Xelari defense systems, while the energy weapons seemed to dissipate against the crystalline hulls. "Minimal damage to target," Volkov reported grimly. "Their hull composition seems to absorb and redistribute our energy weapons." Dr. Mosu, who had remained on the bridge to provide real-time analysis of Xelari technology, looked up from her data tablet. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual energy patterns from their vessels. They appear to be activating their interdimensional technology." Eleanor frowned. "To escape?" "No," Nwosu replied, her expression grave. "I believe they're trying to create a dimensional rupture around us, essentially trapping the Vanguard in a pocket of distorted space-time. If they succeed, we would be effectively removed from normal space." Commander Wei looked up sharply. "They could then transport us directly to their processing facilities without having to destroy us first." "How long until they can establish this rupture?" Eleanor asked. "Based on the energy buildup, approximately 3 minutes, Nwosu responded. 3 minutes. Not enough time for the NOVA system to recharge. Not enough time to break through the encirclement using conventional weapons. Eleanor felt the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on her. She activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is Admiral Reeves. Prepare for emergency maneuver Theta 9. Engineering. Divert all non-essential power to engines and forward shields." Theta 9 was a desperate maneuver. A maximum thrust burned directly toward an enemy vessel, counting on shields and momentum to break through. It was a tactic reserved for situations where there were no good options left, only degrees of bad ones. Target the smallest vessel in their formation, she ordered Navigator Chen. Plot a course that will take us through it and beyond their containment sphere. Chen hesitated only briefly before acknowledging. Course plotted, Admiral. That's the light cruiser at coordinates 045 Mark III. Execute on my mark, Eleanor said, then opened a direct channel to engineering. Commander Nazari, what's the status of the NOVA system? Still charging, Admiral, came the strained reply. 4 more minutes at minimum. We're pushing the capacitors to their absolute limits. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, calculating options and probabilities. When she reopened them, her decision was made. Commander Nazari, I need you to manually override the NOVA safety protocols. Divert power from the containment field directly to the emitter assembly. A shocked silence followed her order. When Nazari finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Admiral, without proper containment, the NOVA discharge would be omnidirectional. We wouldn't just hit the enemy, we'd hit ourselves. The Vanguard wasn't designed to withstand that kind of energy release. I'm aware of the consequences, Commander, Eleanor replied evenly. But if we do nothing, the Xalari will trap us in dimensional space and proceed to harvest Earth unimpeded. Those are not acceptable outcomes. Another impact rocked the ship, more violent than the last. Multiple systems went offline across the bridge displays. Shield integrity at 22%, reported Lieutenant Pottle. Dimensional energy building around our perimeter. 2 minutes until containment. Eleanor looked around at her bridge crew. Humanity's finest, each face showing the determination to fight until the end. Begin Theta 9 maneuver, she ordered. Maximum thrust. Commander Nazari, prepare for manual NOVA override on my command. The Vanguard's engines roared to life, pushing the massive warship forward with sudden acceleration that strained its structural integrity. On the view screen, the targeted Xalari vessel grew rapidly larger as they charged directly toward it. Enemy vessels adjusting position, Volkov reported. They're trying to strengthen their formation in our path. Stay on course, Eleanor commanded. All power to forward shields. The distance closed rapidly minus 50,000 kilometers, 30,000, 10,000. The Xalari vessel loomed large on the view screen, its crystalline structure pulsing with increasing intensity as it brought weapons to bear on the charging human ship. Impact in 10 seconds, Chen announced, his voice remarkably steady. Eleanor opened the engineering channel once more. Commander Nazari, status of NOVA override. Ready, Admiral, came the solemn reply. But I should be the one to execute it. The engineering section will need to manually modulate the power flow during discharge, or we risk immediate core detonation. Eleanor understood what he was saying. Someone would need to remain in engineering during the NOVA discharge. A death sentence. That's not necessary, Commander. Remote override shouled. With respect, Admiral, Nazari interrupted. It is necessary. The power fluctuations will be too rapid and unpredictable for automated systems to handle. This is the only way to ensure the discharge is effective against the enemy, rather than just destroying us outright. Before Eleanor could respond, Lieutenant Patel called out, "Dimensional containment field reaching critical formation. 30 seconds until we're trapped." There was no time for debate. "Understood, Commander," Eleanor acknowledged, her voice thick with emotion for her friend and colleague. "Proceed with manual override. The Vanguard will make your sacrifice count." "It has been my honor, Admiral," Nazari replied simply. "Impact in 5 seconds," Chen announced. "All hands, braced for collision," Eleanor called out. The Vanguard slammed into the Xalari vessel with catastrophic force. The alien ship's crystalline structure shattered against the reinforced prow of the human warship, fragments spinning away into space, But the impact took a severe toll on the Vanguard as well. Alarms blared across the bridge as structural integrity warnings flashed on multiple displays. "We're through their formation," Chen reported, his console sparking from the strain. "But we've sustained heavy damage to forward sections. Decks 3 through 7 reporting multiple hull breaches. The dimensional field is still forming behind us," Patel added urgently. "They're adjusting to our position. 15 seconds until containment." Eleanor activated the engineering channel. "Commander Nazari, execute an NOVA override now." In the engineering section, Commander Tarek Nazari stood before the massive NOVA control assembly. Around him, his engineering team had evacuated to safer sections of the ship, leaving him alone with the experimental weapon system. His dark eyes reflected the pulsing blue light of the power conduits as he input the final override commands. "No VA override initiated," he reported calmly, redirecting containment field power to emitter assembly. On his displays, warning messages cascaded as safety protocols were bypassed one after another. The ship's computer voice repeatedly announced imminent catastrophic system failure, but Nazari ignored it, focused entirely on his task. The NOVA system had been designed to harness the energy of artificially induced quantum singularities, essentially creating and controlling miniature black holes that could be directed as weapons. Without proper containment, that energy would radiate in all directions, including back through the Vanguard itself. As the final safety override engaged, Nazari placed his hands on the manual control rods that would allow him to modulate the power flow during discharge. The metal was already hot to the touch, and he knew it would become superheated within seconds of activation. "NOVA discharge commencing," he reported, his voice remarkably steady despite knowing these were his final moments. "May Earth remember us." On the bridge, Eleanor watched the tactical display as energy readings from the NOVA system climbed toward levels never before attempted. "All hands, emergency power to internal shields," she ordered. "Brace for internal energy wave." The space around the Vanguard suddenly warped as the NOVA discharge began, not as the focused beam of their first attack, but as an expanding sphere of reality-distorting energy. The effect on the surrounding Solari ships was immediate and devastating. Their crystalline structures seemed to bend and twist in impossible ways before shattering completely, the fragments themselves dissolving into subatomic particles. But the Vanguard too was caught in the maelstrom of its own making. The ship shuddered violently as energy cascaded through its hull, overwhelming systems and melting through bulkheads. Emergency force fields flickered into existence throughout the vessel, struggling to contain the catastrophic damage. In engineering, Commander Nazari grimaced in agony as the control rods beneath his hands glowed white-hot, searing his flesh. But he maintained his grip, making minute adjustments that kept the energy flow from collapsing into an instant, ship-destroying feedback loop. His consciousness began to fade as the temperature in engineering rose beyond survivable levels, but his hands remained steady on the controls. On the bridge, officers clung to their stations as the deck pitched beneath them. Smoke filled the air as console after console overloaded and failed. "No VA discharge at 130% of design maximum," Volkov called out, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of emergency alerts. "Dimensional containment field collapsing. Solari fleet. They're disintegrating, Admiral." Eleanor held tight to the command rail, watching as the tactical display showed Solari vessels vanishing one after another from their sensors. Whether destroyed outright or thrown into dimensional rifts created by the NOVA discharge, the effect was the same. The alien fleet was being systematically erased from normal space. "Engineering report," she called out, but there was no response from Commander Nazari. The channel remained open, transmitting only the sound of alarms and the roar of unleashed energy. After what seemed like an eternity but was in reality less than 30 seconds, the violence began to subside. The Vanguard's wild movements steadied, and the overwhelming energy readings on the tactical display gradually declined toward manageable levels. "No VA discharge complete. announced the ship's computer in its unnervingly calm voice. Catastrophic damage to 68% of all ship systems. Life support operating at minimal capacity. Eleanor pulled herself up from the deck where she had fallen during the worst of the turbulence. Around her, the bridge was in ruins. Consoles shattered, display screens cracked, emergency lighting providing the only illumination as main power remained offline. "Status report," she called out, her voice hoarse from the smoke-filled air. All stations. One by one, her surviving officers responded. Lieutenant Patel, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead, looked up from her partially functional sensor array. "Admiral, the auxiliary fleet is gone. All 17 capital ships, all support vessels. Our sensors are damaged, but there's nothing out there larger than debris fragments." Eleanor moved carefully to Patel's station, studying the sensor readings herself. The lieutenant was right. Where moments before an alien armada had surrounded them, now there was nothing but scattered particles and distorted space. "Engineering?" she asked quietly. Lieutenant Chen shook his head. No response from Commander Nazari or any engineering personnel. "Admiral, that section took the brunt of the energy discharge." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Tarek Nazari had been more than her chief engineer. He had been a friend, a brilliant mind who had helped design the very weapon that had saved them but claimed his life. His sacrifice would not be forgotten. "Communications," she said, turning to Lieutenant Rashid. "Can we contact Earth?" Rashid worked his damaged console for several moments before looking up. "Long-range communications are offline, Admiral, but I'm detecting automated distress signals from our perimeter defense satellites. The auxiliary forces that had already reached Earth orbit appear to have been affected by the NOVA discharge as well. They'd gone silent." A wave of exhausted relief washed over Eleanor. They had done it. Against impossible odds, the Vanguard had stopped the auxiliary invasion. Earth would not be harvested today. "Damage control teams to all decks," she ordered. "Priority to life support and propulsion. Let's get this ship moving toward home." As the surviving crew set about their tasks, Eleanor moved to the shattered view screen, now displaying only a static-filled image of the space around them. Somewhere beyond that distorted view was Earth, still safe, still unaware of how close it had come to extinction. 3 weeks later, the FSS Vanguard limped into Earth orbit, its hull scarred beyond recognition, entire sections exposed to vacuum, and sealed off with emergency force fields. It had taken their remaining engineering teams working around the clock to restore enough functionality to the engines for the journey home. Admiral Eleanor Reeves stood once more on the bridge, now partially repaired but still bearing the scars of their desperate battle. Through the restored view screen, she watched as Earth turned serenely below them, blue oceans and white clouds showing no sign of the cosmic horror that had nearly befallen humanity. Commander Wei approached, offering a data tablet. "The official report, Admiral. Ready for your final approval before submission to Fleet Command." Eleanor took the tablet, scanning through the document that detailed their encounter with the auxiliary, the discovery of their harvesting plans, and the desperate battle that had ended with Commander Nazari's sacrifice and the destruction of the alien fleet. "Add one more thing," she said quietly. "A formal recommendation that Commander Tarek Nazari receive the Star of Terra posthumously, and that his name be given to the next vessel of the Vanguard class." We nodded solemnly. "Already included, Admiral. Fleet Command has approved both recommendations. The FSS Nazari will begin construction next month, incorporating the lessons we've learned from this encounter." Eleanor handed the tablet back, her gaze returning to Earth. "And what of the auxiliary? Any sign of additional forces?" "None so far," Wei replied. "Long-range sensors have been deployed throughout the system, and we've established listening posts at the locations where they first appeared. If they return, we'll have advance warning." "They'll return," Eleanor said with certainty. "Species that build empires on harvesting others don't stop after one defeat. They'll be back, perhaps not this year or the next, but eventually. And when they do, they'll find that humanity has teeth. As if to emphasize her point, a small flotilla of Earth vessels approached the vanguard, the first ships of what would become humanity's expanded defense fleet. Already, factories across the planet had been repurposed for warship production, and the best scientific minds were studying the recovered Solari technology. The next time the harvesters came, they would not face a single ship on a desperate mission. They would face a unified human race prepared to defend its existence with every resource at its disposal. Admiral, Lieutenant Patel called from her station. We're receiving a transmission from the International Defense Council. They're requesting your presence at an emergency session to brief world leaders on the Solari threat. Eleanor nodded. Inform them I'll be there. Commander Wei, you have the bridge. As she walked toward the turbolift, Eleanor paused at the memorial plaque that had been installed near the bridge entrance. Upon it were engraved the names of the 87 crew members who had died during their mission, with Commander Nazari's name at the top. She placed her hand briefly on the cool metal surface. We bought humanity time, she said softly. Now we must make sure it wasn't wasted. 6 months later, a Solari scout vessel approached the outer boundary of the solar system, moving cautiously as it probed for signs of the harvesting fleet that had gone silent. As it passed Neptune's orbit, its sensors detected something unexpected. A network of detection beacons that immediately locked onto its position. Before the scout could transmit a warning back to its civilization, 12 Earth vessels materialized around it, their weapons charged and ready. Leading the formation was a sleek warship bearing the name FSS Nazari on its hull, and painted beneath that name was an image that would soon become recognized across the stars. The silhouette of the original vanguard, wreathed in the energy of its final battle. The message to any would-be harvesters was clear. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars not as prey, but as predators, and they would defend their world with a ferocity that would become legendary among the spacefaring species of the galaxy. The human warships weren't just powerful, they were legendary, and the civilizations that learned to fear them would pass down stories of the species that refused to be harvested, the defenders who turned the tables on the predators, the humans who fought back.